My name is Laura Hale, and by 29, I thought I understood what family meant. I grew up believing loyalty mattered, that showing up for one another was a kind of sacred rule. But all of that unraveled one evening in the very room where I had once opened birthday gifts and practiced school presentations. That night, the living room didn't feel like home. It felt like a courtroom, and I was the defendant. My family sat in a semicircle, faces carved from stone. My younger sister, Kasia, perched on the ottoman like a bruised porcelain doll. At 26, she had mastered the look of helpless distress. Her latest business attempt, another flashy lifestyle venture, had collapsed spectacularly, leaving a crater of $500,000. And somehow they planned to fill that crater with me. My mother, Marina, stood by the fireplace. Real estate polish in every gesture. She radiated a cold authority that didn't invite discussion. "Laura," she said, voice flat, "your store is worth enough to solve this. Sell it. We pay off Kasia's debt. Everyone moves on." My store. The gilded thread. The one thing in my life that was entirely mine, built from my inheritance, my labor, my dreams. Her words landed like a blow. "No," I whispered. "I'm not giving up my life because she gambled hers away." Kasia burst into tears, the theatrical kind she'd perfected years ago. My brother, Silas, leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a small victory smirk on his lips. My father stared at the rug like the patterns held the answers to every unpleasant moment he had ever ducked. Then came the line that cracked something deep inside me. "You're not essential," my mother said quietly, as if stating a simple fact. "If you vanished tomorrow, nothing in this family would fall apart." Silence. No one disagreed, not even with their eyes. In that moment, decades of small wounds aligned into a single truth. I had always been second choice, background noise, the responsible one expected to fix everything without being seen. And suddenly, the decision formed, sharp and undeniable. I would leave. Not as a tantrum. As a liberation. I excused myself, walked to my old bedroom and closed the door. I didn't cry. There was just a strange, icy clarity settling into place. Packed a small bag. I emailed the manager of my store, giving her full authority. I began shutting down my digital footprints, preparing to disappear. Before leaving, I placed a single item on the entry table. A key to the safe deposit box my grandfather left me, and a short note. They thought the key would lead to money. It would lead to truth. Without a sound, I stepped out into the night and didn't look back. The air felt different, like the first breath after being underwater too long. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Everything that happened next would change their world, and mine, forever. What I put inside that safe deposit box was the beginning of the end, and the beginning of my freedom. I drove through the night, fueled by numb determination. 3 hours later, I found myself in a small valley town I'd never heard of. A faded motel sign flickered like it was winking me into anonymity. I checked in under my own name, one last tether before cutting myself loose. Inside the bland motel room, silence pressed in on me, clean and neutral. No judgment, no expectations. The kind of quiet that made grief spill out. And it did. Not for them, but for the version of family I had spent my life hoping they might become. By morning, steadiness had replaced grief. I secured my accounts. I transferred emergency funds to the store's manager, Amelia. Capable, loyal, kind. I booked a consultation with a lawyer. I forwarded my mail. Bought a prepaid phone. Step by step, I erased myself from their reach. Meanwhile, I imagined what was happening at home. They would have discovered the note early. I could see it play out. My mother, irritated that I wasn't downstairs, searching my room, then freezing when she found the envelope. My father, baffled. My siblings, circling like vultures around whatever they assumed I'd left behind. They would rush to the bank, whispering theories, expecting gold. Instead, the safe deposit box held something far more devastating. A binder, meticulously organized, documenting every dollar I had ever given Kasia over the years. Bank transfers, screenshots, written promises, all ignored. Next to it, a sealed letter from my grandfather, the only person who ever saw me. His words were honest, brutal in their clarity. A warning about my mother's conditional love, my brother's jealousy, my sister's manipulation, my father's silence. And then, build a life that is yours. Protect it from those who cannot love you without taking from you. I knew that letter would detonate something in that room. Their narrative about me, the convenient story in which I was ungrateful, selfish, less valuable, would collapse. Yet even imagining their shock, I didn't feel victorious, just detached. After settling into the motel, I walked through the little town, discovering it had a kind of slow, grounded charm. Wooden storefronts, a sleepy river, a cafe that smelled like warm cinnamon. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe without bracing. I wasn't running away. I was finally walking toward myself. That night in the motel, wrapped in a thrift store sweater, I realized something I had never allowed myself to consider. Freedom wasn't the absence of family. It was the absence of people who used love as a weapon. The next morning, a calm certainty settled over me. My family hadn't just lost me. They had lost the illusion that I would always stay, always fix, always sacrifice. And I was just beginning to understand how powerful that truth really was. But the real aftershock didn't come from the bank. It came months later, when one of them finally found me. Weeks passed. I rented a small cottage on the outskirts of town, a cozy place with peeling blue shutters and a garden full of potential. The valley was quiet, peaceful, and astonishingly healing. I worked remotely with Amelia. She handled the day-to-day operations of the Gilded Thread with effortless grace. Sales increased. Customers sent emails praising the store. Creativity flowed out of me again. Ideas for new kits, new designs, new displays. My energy was no longer siphoned away by people who viewed me as a resource. But back in the city, the tremors of my departure grew into a landslide. I know because of the email that slipped through my spam filter. Subject line: Lara. It was from my brother, Silas. He'd always been the most openly resentful, the one who couldn't stand that my quiet success reflected poorly on his bruised ego. But the message wasn't anger. It was disarray wrapped in blame. He wrote about the binder. Letter. The cracks forming in their walls. Mom won't leave her room. Dad is acting strange. Cash's creditors are calling every day. You've blown up everything. The last line. You've torn this family apart. I hope you're satisfied. I stared at those words for a long time, the way one might study an insect pinned to a board. Fascination, disbelief, detachment. Because even now, after the evidence sat in their hands, he still couldn't comprehend the truth. I didn't tear the family apart. I simply stopped holding it together. I deleted the email. Blocked him. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore. My life was blooming in ways I had never tasted. I made friends. I cooked meals for myself because they tasted good, not because I had to feed others. I went hiking, bought second-hand books, learned the names of local birds. The peace felt almost sacred. And then, nearly a year after I vanished, my past walked straight into my present. It was a cool autumn afternoon at the farmer's market. I was choosing apples when someone said my name softly, like they were afraid it might shatter. Lara. Turned. My heart jolted. My father. He looked older, smaller, like life had been draining him drop by drop. I hired someone to find you, he said, voice heavy. Your mother doesn't know. He described the aftermath of my disappearance. How my mother sold the house because the walls felt like accusations. How my sister filed for bankruptcy and was working at a diner. How my brother moved out and blamed everyone for everything. How the family had fractured under the weight of truths they refused to face. And then he looked at me with eyes filled with something I had never seen in him. Accountability. He apologized. Not with excuses, not with blame shifting, but with raw regret. I failed you, he said. I looked away when I should have protected you. You deserved better than the silence I gave you. For a moment, I felt that old familiar ache, the longing for a father who never showed up. But the ache didn't swallow me. I had grown past it. I told him I was living a good life now. Peaceful one. One I wasn't willing to sacrifice for the sake of nostalgia or guilt. He nodded, tears tracing down. I understand, he whispered. Be happy, Lara. He walked away, disappearing into the crowd. And instead of feeling gutted, felt free. But freedom wasn't the end. It was the foundation for everything extraordinary that came next. 2 years passed like pages turning in a book I finally chose to write for myself. The cottage became my sanctuary. The Gilded Thread flourished beyond anything I imagined. Amelia became not just my manager but my friend, a woman who understood the store's heartbeat as deeply as I did. I expanded the business online, collaborated with creators, launched seasonal kits that sold out in days. When I walked through the valley town, people waved, not because they wanted something, but because they genuinely liked me. It was stunning how different life felt when love wasn't conditional. I heard pieces of news now and then through distant relatives. My mother and sister lived in a small apartment together, their relationship strained by long-buried resentments. My brother was in therapy, finally facing the bitterness he'd carried since childhood. My father lived quietly, tending a small garden behind a rental home. I didn't hate them. I didn't miss them. They were simply chapters from another book. My life here felt whole. And in the quiet moments, especially when locking up the shop at night, I thought about my grandfather, his letter, his faith in me, the kind of love that didn't demand, didn't drain, didn't manipulate. He saw the heroine in me before I ever recognized her. That thought carried me into the biggest turning point yet. Because one early summer morning, I stood inside a bright, airy building with enormous windows and sunlight cascading across polished wooden floors. A second location for the Gilded Thread. A dream I never dared to dream when I lived under the shadow of a family who believed my worth was measured in what I could sacrifice. Now, building my future felt like breathing, natural, intuitive, necessary. That day, standing on the ladder with a paint roller splattered with soft sage green, I realized something profound. I didn't escape my old life. I rebuilt myself from the roots up. And in doing so, I had become someone powerful, someone whole, someone free. But even freedom has a final test. And mine came the day my mother tried reaching out. The message came unexpectedly, through a forwarded email chain from a distant cousin. My mother had written it, though not to me directly. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even an attempt to reconnect. It was a lament, a carefully worded explanation about how I had abandoned them, how my choices had torn the household apart. But woven through the lines, unintentionally, were fragments of truth she didn't realize she was revealing. Her shame, her loss of control, her crumbling self-image. Reading it didn't hurt, didn't ignite anger. It didn't reopen wounds. 'Cause I had healed. I realized then, closure isn't something others give you. It's a door you learn to close yourself. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My life had moved so far beyond their reach it felt like watching someone else's storm from the safety of a distant hill. Focused on the new store. On the community forming around it. On the workshops we hosted, where strangers became friends and creativity turned into connection. My world was full of laughter, warmth, and possibility. Sometimes in the quiet moments, I thought about the question people love to ask. Would you do anything differently? And every time the answer was steady, unwavering. No. Leaving saved me. I learned that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who shows up with honesty, kindness, and respect. I learned that love without boundaries is just self-destruction wearing a sentimental mask. And most importantly, I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, even if your voice shakes, even if your heart aches, even if the world you knew burns behind you. Because on the other side is a life worth living. A life you choose. A life you create. I closed the shop one evening, turned off the lights, and stepped outside into the golden glow of dusk. The valley stretched before me, peaceful and wide. A place I never planned to find, yet one that became the truest version of home. And I thought, I didn't disappear from their house. I finally appeared in my own life.